Hello, and welcome to Jeff Kagan Interviews. I'm Jeff Kagan. Jeff Kagan Interviews is a podcast where I interview executives of interesting and important companies in our ever changing and expanding industry. Today we have with us Ramesh Kaza of Shabodi, a private wireless service. Welcome, Ramesh.
Jeff, thank you for having me today. Great to be here.
It's my pleasure. Private wireless is a relatively new and increasingly important sector of the wireless industry. So let's spend a few minutes today and explore this sector and the role Shabodi plays. So Ramesh, I have several questions, but feel free to take this conversation in whatever direction that you think is important. So to begin with, tell me about yourself and what motivated you to start up in the 5G space.
Yeah, Jeff, I've been with Cisco in my earlier career time for almost 20 years. 20 years is a long time, but Cisco is a big company. As you know, it grew through acquisitions. So one thing that I did was every 4 years, I moved from one technology to another. So started off with networking, then did collaboration, did international assignment. Then my last few years was running IoT business. So even though it was a big company, it was all about starting something new, solution services team, and how do I grow that particular business into the next stage. So I always wanted to work for a startup company that is the next cutting edge technology.
Mm-hmm.
So when my friend Harpreet Jiki called me one day and asked if I first would join Shabodi and also invest in the company. So then I went to visit the company, understood his idea, the vision. I bought into it, and now I am in. It's been almost 2 years coming up, but I've been associated with the company for 4 years because I'm an early investor. So
Right.
it's been fun.
That's great. So what problem does Shabodi solve? What is it that you do?
So at Shabodi, we built a network API exposure platform. The platform allows the interaction of the applications with any programmable networks. So networks such as 5G are not only a service-based networks, they are programmable. That means the capabilities inside are exposed to the developers. So at Shabodi, what we are doing is we expose such capabilities from advanced networks to in a simple APIs to the developers. So if there is a developer out there that is building an application, they don't need to be a technology geek to
Mm-hmm.
get those insights from the network. So they can use APIs from Shabodi and build what we call as a network aware applications. So one of the unique differentiators that what we do at Shabodi is we not only expose network APIs, but we do this across multi-vendor systems. As you know, the network is diverse, right? There are multiple vendors who provide the services today. So we discover it across the multi-vendor systems. Second thing that we do uniquely is about multi-access. Today, Wi-Fi is so prevalent, it's not going to go away. So it has to coexist, right? Whether you're doing a 5G or a 6G, you've been in this industry for so long, you have seen the evolution of it. So the technology has to coexist. So we also discover services from wireless, other wired networks, and finally operator networks. So that's what we do. It's a network API exposure platform that works across the multi-vendor, multi-access, and multi-operator networks.
Okay. So can you break it down into one line or two lines why it's so important to solve this network API problem?
Yeah, so across the world, all the telecom operators have invested heavily on private 5G infrastructure.
Right.
It's billions and billions of dollars have been spent on that infrastructure. So today, the way they sell and the returns for them is by selling you and I an extra $5 or $10 speed boost plans, right? But if they continue to do that way, they are not going to recover probably 80% of their investment that they made. So they need to find new ways of get the return on the investment. So there are few things that are coming up like fixed wireless access, edge computing, right? So that's in another way. Network API is in another way. That means these networks are intelligent assets. These are programmable assets. So what operators are looking at is how can I open up this network to developers, build a stronger developer ecosystem so that there are more powerful applications that the developers can build so that the carriers can take them to B2B customers in the enterprise world, basically. So it's a way for them to monetize the networks, accelerate the investment that they made.
So do customers understand all the different new areas that you can help them achieve? Or do they sort of come in green and you have to teach them about these new things?
Yeah, so most customers do not understand, for example, what is a network API to them. They don't care about network API. So all they care is what's the outcome that you are delivering. So, for example, we walk into a factory. The executive says, I wanted to have a pervasive connectivity and all my applications, whether they are running on a laptop or industrial control applications, as I put slowly on the network, I don't want to see any failure of them. Right? So that's the outcome they are looking for. Right? So, improve their production efficiencies, reduce the quality control, right, and so forth. So that's what they care about. Now, we as a trusted advisors work with customers along with our ecosystem has to figure out what's the right solution for those customers.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not every customers need a network API. For example, some customers want to run just a simple voice calls on the network to begin with. Do they need a network API? They don't, right? So I think we see the need for network APIs for business critical, high bandwidth, low latency, right, type of applications. And as they put more and more applications on the network, how do you give priority to one application over the another application, right? So that's the journey typical start. So to answer your question, yeah, no customer will say I want a network API. Right? They start with a business outcome, and we and also our ecosystem partners, we have to work together and say, okay, how do I deliver that? Network API could become part of that.
So you're part in the training business as well. So who are your customers?
So we started when the company started. We started focusing on private 5G market. So that's it's still a private 5G wireless technology going towards manufacturing customers, mining customers. Right? These are the two verticals we initially picked. The reason is there is a lot of focus around digital transformation in the manufacturing industry, especially after COVID. Customers want flexible manufacturing lines, they want pervasive connectivity, they want to drive production efficiency and so forth. So we started focusing on manufacturing vertical, and our end users are application vendors. Let's say a drone application vendor, or it could be a control systems application vendor, or a video surveillance, video camera vendor. So they are the end users who use our platform to build the applications and then deliver it to the end customer. In this case, it's the manufacturer.
So there's a lot of different models. I guess each customer would be different.
Yeah.
So what problems do you solve for the enterprise customer?
Yeah. So let's take an example of a manufacturing customer. Right? So typically, most deployments start with connectivity, the network as a foundation, right? And so they want to start with connectivity. Slowly, they want to add all the applications onto the network. One analogy I give is you don't want to buy a Ferrari if your goal is to go to a grocery store every other day. If you're just doing a simple connectivity, why do you need, right, a high-speed private 5G network, right? You might as well just, use a public network. So that's where we say, okay, you got the pervasive connectivity across the factory. Then how about you add applications, right? One, applications two, application three. It could be a autonomous guided vehicle. It could be a drone that is doing a surveillance. It could be a video cameras. As you start putting more and more applications on the network, what happens, Jeff, is these applications do not know that there is another application that is contending for the same network resource.
Mm-hmm.
So they are not cooperating, they are not collaborating, right? Each application says, I need the bandwidth, I need bandwidth, I need bandwidth. But there may be a criticality, right, of a security breach, or there could be an autonomous guided vehicle that need to go, right, and find its next job. So in that case, how do you prioritize? How do these applications get what they want from the network? So that's the problem. That's the glue that we bring in so that the applications are using the network in an intelligent way. So that's what we call a network awareness. Traditionally, application developers never bothered, right? For example, we have Netflix at home, we have a cable connection. If four of us are already watching, Netflix at home, I'm sure, right? We see the, quality issues, for example.
Yep.
So yeah, so that's the type of scenarios that we work. For example, I'll give you another example. Let's take an airport. Let's say an airport puts up a private 5G network. Then you have multiple tenants inside the airport. Right? There is a border patrol. There is a vending machine. There are escalators. Right? These are all different shops are there, retail shops. Who is priority? The security, nation security comes priority, right? So that's where which application needs to get priority is what we can help.
I guess the CEO doesn't want to have to compete with the Coke machine.
Exactly.
So what about mobile network operators, MNOs?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So that's the second type of a customer for us. Right? So as you know today, the mobile network operators, some of them are already began their journey in exposing network APIs, um, and then some of them are in the early stages of, how do I do this, right? API exposure. The underlying technology for them is a core and a radio network, right, at the end of the day. So though for those customers, MNOs who are early in the journey, our platform can help accelerate the time to market for them to expose those network APIs to the developers. Either they can have their own developer marketplaces or work with aggregators, but we can help them accelerate the exposure of those network APIs much faster.
Okay. So what is the Shabodi value proposition?
So is it for enterprise customers or is it for service providers? Which
Yeah.
one?
Well, yeah, it would be with all of the different customers.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
So
you're being pulled in so many different directions, but you still, need to have something in writing that you take to bed with you every night that you can look at in the middle of the night. You'll look at in the morning. You know exactly who you are and what you're doing.
Yeah. So for us, our unique value proposition is today there are other API vendors that are out there in the market. They expose the APIs for their platforms, for their networks. One of the unique differentiation for Shabodi is we discover those network services from the multi-vendors. So the networks are going to be hybrid, right? So there are so many 5G core vendors, the radio vendors. So our value proposition is an application that is built on one vendor should work across consistently. So that's number one. Right? It's a multi-vendor network services discovery that we do. The second thing is about multi-access. It's not just enough exposing a network API from a cellular network. Like I mentioned, when we walk into a factory, I do see a lot of existing Wi-Fi networks. I have done myself when I was at Cisco. I walked into refineries, I walked into manufacturing floors. We did Wi-Fi deployments. They do work for certain use cases. So how do you make sure the a network request such as a quality and demand, for example, coming from an application works not only on a cellular network but also works on Wi-Fi and goes into the backhaul, right? So that's the second unique value proposition that Shabodi does. And
Mm-hmm.
the final thing is, I'm sure you know, there are initiatives from GSMA and Kamara to drive consistency of these network APIs across the operators. That's a very good effort. And then what we also do is we normalize even Kamara provider implementations. Today, there is a Kamara standard, GSMA standard. There are variations in the providers on how they implement it, so we can normalize that. So, for example, if there is an application that is built using a Kamara API that works for one telecom operator, then using Shabodi, it will work across all operators. So to sum it up, it's about multi-vendor, it's about multi-access, and finally it's about multi-operator. So it's discovering all the services, exposing them as a very simple API, such as set bandwidth for 5 minutes for 20 meg. That's it. That's all developer cares. He doesn't need to be a telecom geek at all.
Mm-hmm. I love talking with you. You always open my eyes to the new directions that we're heading in. All right, so finally, let me ask you one last question. And this is to look into the future and what is it going to look like? What can we expect next from the private wireless space going forward in this sector as it continues to mature and expand next year, 5 years, 10 years from now?
So I don't know if I can predict for 10 years, but I'll tell you for next couple of years, okay, what I can see that. Um, these private wireless networks are managed by the IT teams, and they are serving mostly the customers in the operation technology, right? In a factory, for example, right? It's the OT people that are using the network, but the network is managed by the IT. So the traditional IT teams do not have exposure or an understanding of how to manage a radio network. They don't understand interference. They don't understand, spectrums or the license and everything. So one thing that I see, the trend that is happening in the industry is making the management provisioning of these cellular networks as easy as Wi-Fi networks. So that's where we saw in the industry acquisitions, right, that are happening in the enterprise companies acquiring 5G core companies so that they can bring the technologies together. So that's that type of a consolidation. I am expecting it to happen. And then the second thing is there needs to be more and more devices that need to come to support and justify the deployment of the 5G network, right? So, when I walk into the factory floors or the mines or anything, I still see vibration sensors that may be a Wi-Fi, right, or a Bluetooth. So having the device ecosystem is very, very critical to drive the adoption of these 5G networks. And
Mm-hmm.
the third is, I think, more and more powerful use cases. So, I gave you the example of a Ferrari, right? You don't want to deploy a 5G private network just for a connectivity alone, right? So I think there needs to be more compelling use cases as the industry and the companies like us share these outcomes more and more. I think customers will come forward. I think those are my three things I would say, to drive.
Those are accurate. We have to remember private wireless is a brand new, very exciting, very important space. But it's full of small companies that don't necessarily have a lot of money, and big companies that have a lot of money, but they don't necessarily have the technology. So we started to see some mergers, some partnerships, and I think that's going to continue going forward. And who knows who's going to be leading? If you look at the marketplace today, you can see who some of the companies are who are leading. But will that be the same 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now, or will they all change? It's a very exciting place. You happen to be in a great industry that's very important. Doesn't mean there's not going to be bumps in the road. There's going to be plenty of bumps in the road.
Absolutely.
But it's heading in the right direction, and it's a very important. Well, thank you very much, Ramesh. I really enjoyed this conversation, and thank you to the watcher, the viewer. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to be a guest on Jeff Kagan Interviews, I invite you to get in touch with me by email at jeff@jeffkagan.com. And my website is just simply jeffkagan.com. Until the next time, thank you and goodbye.
Thank you, Jeff.